Okay, these are my three audience members: my grandma, my cousin, my friend Kyle. Okay, my informative speech is on Steve Jobs. How many of you own an Apple product or have ever downloaded something from the iTunes store? Everyone but Chris. Okay. I, for one, have many Apple products. I'm filming with my iPad. I have my Mac here. iPhone in the pocket. Many of you may not realize it, but Steve Jobs has had an impact on just about all of our lives. He's created ideas and products that we would all find hard to live without at this point. Products just such as the iPhone, iPad, Mac, and iTunes. As a person living in this day and age, I know the kind of impact technology has had on everyday lives. Our lives wouldn't be the same without Steve Jobs if it wasn't for him. His visions and ambitions has given us some of the best technology in the world. He was one of the most ambitious minds in the last few decades, and without him and his ideas, the world would be a much different place. To be fully aware of Steve Jobs' legacy, we need to be aware of three aspects of his life: his early life, his Apple career, and his battle with cancer. So to further understand Steve Jobs' legacy, we need to explore the great accomplishments of his life. His ambition and uniqueness could be seen at an early point in his life. Steve Jobs, out of high school, attended Reed College for one semester before eventually dropping out because he was somewhat of a hippie and was more interested in fasting and using LSD for a little bit there. He eventually obtained a job at Atari to get some money, bring some money in, and after saving up some money, went to India for a few months to seek enlightenment with one of his friends, and came back disappointed from that. When he arrived home, he took interest in computers and writing software with his friend Steve Wozniak, who he met when he was 13 years old, when Steve Wozniak was 18. They took up kind of like a hobby of working with computers and creating computer boards in garages on the weekends. Steve Jobs worked with Wozniak on these computer boards, and he realized the potential that the field of what computers had, and he convinced his friend to open up a company now known as Apple. In 1980, Apple went public 4 years after it opened, after it came into business, and it had the biggest IPO since Ford in the 1950s, and this according to allaboutstevejobs.com. Although Jobs had an interesting early life, many of us only know him due to Apple. When Jobs first started out with the company, he sold his car for $1,000 to help Apple get up and running. Once it got going, sales more than quadrupled in the first 5 years, and by the time he was 25 years old, he was worth more than $25 million. He lost his operational duties at Apple. He got kind of demoted and was just on the board of directors and lost any decision-making abilities that he had. He eventually left and sold all but one share of stock at Apple because he was so angry with the company. While he was gone, he used money to create the company now known as Pixar. Eventually, though, Apple began to tank and wanted Steve Jobs back, and he eventually came back to Apple and pretty much saved the company. Apple really began to excel in the early part of the century when, in 2001, he released the iPod, and 2007 released the first iPhone, and the iPad in 2010. Also during this time, he released the iTunes Store and the App Store, which became huge hits. he basically changed the music industry with releasing iTunes, brought together all the record companies in a big deal, and changed the industry. According to Forbes.com, Jobs' net worth was $7 billion at the time of his death. Although throughout his life Steve Jobs saw great success, he struggled with pancreatic cancer for many years before it eventually took his life. According to CNN.com, he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer in 2003. He tried alternative methods, like alternative diets and techniques, which didn't work very well, and he eventually opted for surgery in 2004. He was temporarily cured of cancer. Eventually the cancer came back in 2008. You can see here it shows Jobs in 2007 looks healthy, and then 2008 much thinner, much paler. You can see that his health is starting to decline. In 2009, just months before he would have died, he received a liver transplant. His health looked good again until late 2010 when it began declining. Cancer eventually took his life on October 5th, 2011 at the age of 56. Steve Jobs was a businessman and innovator whose legacy will never be forgotten. Steve Jobs' early life, career at Apple and Pixar, and his hard-fought battle with a disease that eventually took his life have all contributed to an outstanding legacy of the man. I hope next time you pick up the iPhone or download that song from iTunes, you realize the impact that he's had on all of our lives. And thank you all for listening.